Well, thank you so much, Chanel, for giving us our reading.
Yeah, thanks, Renelle. Good
It's really,
to see you.
yeah, it's really great to see you, and we hope that you and all the family are doing well. Now, the Ten Commandments. Well, they were given to Moses during that long trek through the desert after God had brought the people of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. Now, theirs had been a story of ups and downs for several hundred years, starting with the fall from grace into sin, which we read about last week, and the consequent loss of relationship with God, which they'd been meant to enjoy. Well, generations after that, God had reached out to the family of Abraham, and he made him promises that through his descendants, the whole world was going to be blessed. Well, eventually, Abraham's great-grandson Joseph became the right-hand man to Egypt's Pharaoh. And that was in spite of the attempts of Joseph's jealous brothers to send him into slavery when he was about 17 years old. And it's a really fantastic example of a time when God must have appeared to be saying no to the expectations and hopes of this extremely promising young man. But actually, it was only to take him into a far more glorious future. Because Joseph's God-given wisdom had enabled him to protect Egypt and the surrounding nations from a catastrophic famine. And it eventually led to reconciliation with his own family. And later, he was able to say to them that you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. And so God was glorified and the people were blessed. But back to Moses and the Ten Commandments, those days when Joseph and his family had helped in Egypt, those days have now long gone. And the friendship and gratitude of the Egyptians had turned to suspicion of Joseph's family, so that they were enslaved and oppressed, and by now there are many thousands of them. But God worked through Moses, who was another of Abraham's descendants, to bring them out of slavery and into freedom. Only for the people to treat God with such distrust that they refused to enter the land he wanted to give them, because they thought there was danger there. So here they are, wandering in the wilderness, and they do it for 40 years, through their own disobedience and folly. Now you think God might have lost patience with them, but he doesn't leave them helpless. In fact, he gives them a set of rules to live by, a list of things that they mustn't do, but also, when seen in reverse, a list of regulations which would bless them and ultimately bless us and bring them closer to God and to each other. Now, the first 4 commandments are not no's. They are commands of things that have to be done. And if you like, they're regulations. But they were certainly more than just general guidance, which had to be regularly updated, like we're getting increasingly used to.
Yeah.
Instead, these first 4 commandments are all to do with relationship between the people and God. And the very first one is a declaration out of which all the others will fall. There are to be no other gods in anyone's life, which means that they, and we, must allow nothing and no one to come before our relationship with God. Now, we might think that idols aren't a problem for us these days, unless, of course, you count money, celebrity culture, online influences and the like, all of which threaten us with a different kind of slavery, which is born of self-obsession and self-idolatry. So we forget about God and his love for us. God will not be mocked, and he's jealous for our love and commitment, so that he can keep us safe from all the influences and dangers which resulted from the fall. Now, we read, didn't we, just earlier, that if we get it wrong, there are consequences. But the rewards of getting it right are indescribably magnificent. So let's be careful how we use God's name in any context. I think if we bring God into an argument, we'd better be respectful and careful especially if he might not really appreciate what we imply about him when we're talking to others. And we must respect the Sabbath. Now, whatever day of the week that is to you, we're very conscious of, for many people, Sunday is a working day. Several Christian writers have pointed out recently that the ruthless elimination of hurry is vital in this modern age because it leads to resting in the presence of God. We can't carry on living at 100 miles per hour and still experience the stillness and peace of God. Now, when he tells us to observe the Sabbath, he isn't being a killjoy. He's trying to keep us sane and connected to him and to each other. Now, we recommend to you actually the reflection on living life at a slower pace, which Joth Hunt, our regional minister, has prepared for our association. It's on the Southern Counties Baptist Association website, and it is well worth the 7 minutes of your time that it takes to watch it.
Absolutely, and I would echo that recommendation.
Yes,
it's a
very
really
good.
helpful video.
Yeah.
Now, those first 4 commandments are summarized by the one commandment that Jesus said is the greatest of all, that we should love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. You'll find that in Mark chapter 12. I just wonder, as an aside, whether Jesus had the first 4 commandments in mind when he instructed us to love God 4 ways, with our heart and soul and mind and strength. I'll leave you to ponder that one. But Jesus went on to say that the second greatest commandment is this: love your neighbour as yourself. Of course, if you're familiar with the 10 Commandments, then you will know that the last 6 deal with our relationships with each other and could easily be summarized as love your neighbour as yourself. We're familiar with these particular commandments as a list of thou shalt nots or don'ts, which can easily sound a bit negative. But as Pauline said, this is not about God being a killjoy. It's about him keeping us connected with each other as well as with him. It's about him fulfilling the rich potential of his plans and his purposes for our lives. To help us understand how these commandments do that for us, why not turn them on their head and list them as a whole bunch of do's rather than don'ts? I wonder, how might that read? Let's have a go. Actually, the first of these commandments is already put in positive terms. Honour your father and mother. It'll do you good, and God will bless you. And if we continue in that vein, then with the other commandments, we get something like this. Instead of you shall not murder, how about value each other's lives? Do all that you can to help others live life to the full, which is actually what Jesus said he came to help us do. And so helping each other live full lives is a way of being Jesus to each other. Perhaps today it even includes the instructions to wash your hands, to wear a mask and to give each other space. The hands, face, space instruction. And then in place of don't commit adultery, how about simply be faithful? You could expand on that by quoting Proverbs 5 and verses 18 and 19. Always delight in the wife or the husband of your youth. Actually, the text is a tiny bit more explicit than that, but this goes out pre-Watershed. You can read it for yourself. But it goes on to say, may you be intoxicated always by her love or by his love. That's not a bad approach to take in a relationship, is it? We could rewrite you shall not steal as respect what belongs to others. But again, surely it's more than just that. The New Testament speaks of God loving it when we're generous with our possessions. It speaks of giving rather than taking. And Jesus even goes so far as to say, love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. As for you shall not give false testimony, again, that's simple, isn't it? Be honest. But once again, it's more than just that. We're all familiar with occasions when someone, and possibly sometimes even ourselves, has abused the biblical principle of speaking the truth in love as a justification to hurt someone. Instead, this commandment means telling the truth not as a way of scoring points, but with integrity and kindness. Those examples are just suggestions. You might phrase them differently, so why not have a go when you've got a few minutes to spare? But it's the last commandment, do not covet, which I think lies at the heart of the need for all the others. Even the command to honour your parents counters the age-old teenage complaint that you don't know anything. All my friends' parents would let me do that. I wish they were my parents.
We never heard that.
No, we didn't. We were such good parents. Yeah. A positive spin on this last command is therefore vital if we are going to care appropriately for other people's lives, or their family, or their property, or indeed for our own integrity. The Apostle Paul puts it like this in Philippians 4. I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. How does he do this? Well, he goes on to add, I can do all this through him who gives me strength. He does it in relationship with Jesus, who came to help him live life in all its fullness. And God's better yes for each of us is that we can know the same help too. So what can we do this week to learn a little more about the secret of contentment and therefore find ourselves more closely aligned with the better yes that the Ten Commandments are pointing us towards? Perhaps it comes back to what Pauline said about ruthlessly eliminating hurry and learning to live life in the slow lane for a change. Not only will that stop us from chasing after all the things we think we want and which stop us from loving God and loving others, it will give us time for God and help us to love him more deeply.
So let's reflect upon all of this as we sing our next song, because it speaks both of our love for God and the love for others that he calls us to show. But all of that is only possible because God is faithful in showing love to us in the first place. The song is, Lord, I come before your throne of grace. What a faithful God have I.